I'm going to call the workshop, actually it is 6:03, special meeting. Thank you. And we only have one thing on there, it's Heather Metcalf, and we're going to discuss circuit breakers.
We need to do a roll call or anything? No?
You want, well,
Larry, are these
do
your
you need to do a roll call?
No, they're not. They're Vicky's.
Oh,
She'll make that little
I
button.
saw the thing.
She'll make that little towel sing. There's a reason why Vicky and I have those on.
Yeah, let the record show we do have 5, so we do have a quorum.
Yep.
Okay, so hopefully some of you are familiar with this report that I do every year for a circuit breaker. I also included prior years so that you can compare. If you're looking at the 2019, I like to start on the right-hand side, kind of in the middle there of our 4 different taxing brackets. This is where it all starts from. And the numbers come from the abstract, which is what the auditor calculates for the property taxes to be billed this year. So you can see in each taxing district how much impact was hit for the 1%, 2%, and 3% circuit breakers and the over 65. It totals that 4.6 million under the 1%, and the number below that, the 1.6 is the difference from last year to this year. So it kind of compares going forward, or from last year. Then at the to the right of that is the tax rates and the proportion of the city's tax rate compared to the total tax rate. So you get the percentage of the tax rate over the circuit breaker total impact, and it tells you the total impact of what the city's circuit breaker impact should be, which is the 5.174 number. And the difference from last year is an increase by $1.14 million. It's a 28.33% increase. I don't think I have the percentage on yours. But looking at the tax rates, our tax rate went down from last year. You can see on the 2018 section, if you want to pull your papers apart, that's kind of what I did. So in 2018, the city's tax rate was 1.7331. For 2019, it's 1.68. Sorry. What was that again? 1.7331. And this year it is 1.6813. So the city's tax rate went down, but the school's tax rate increased by, and that's the reason why we got hit by the circuit breaker so hard, is their debt rate increased by that 22 cents. So we take that $5 million impact and we apportion it throughout our funds that we have, our tax rate funds, which is all the way on the left-hand side. And it gets apportioned by the levy. So our certified levy this year is that $28,611,000, and then it's weighted out on how much the percentage of our budget or our levy is towards the total, and then we take that times by the total circuit breaker, and that tells you what each fund is calculated to have an impact for the circuit breaker. So you can see that $5,174,000 is the same as the total that we figured all the way over on the right-hand side. Is everyone following that? Okay, nodding. So below that is where we have estimated when we did the budget for our 4 tax rate funds. We budgeted a total of $4,003,000 for the impact to be. It actually came in at that 5.174, which is, you can see the difference of $864,000 shortage. So if you look at the years prior, which is what I like to do, is kind of see some trends. The 2018, the box below that difference will be filled out once we get settlement, and that will tell you exactly how much we actually receive for spring settlement and then actually what we receive for fall settlement. So there could be delinquencies that were paid, there could be people who are paying in advance, there could be all kinds of different reasons why we're collecting more or less tax dollars. There could be, so if you look at the 2018 section, on your little paper here instead of looking at 2019. Down at the bottom there. See if I can get this to work. You can see that the actual circuit breaker impact was really 3.6. We had budgeted 4.032. And then if you follow it over to the left-hand side, based on what was calculated by the abstract, we gained $428,000 in revenue. So yes, this is calculated by the actual tax bills that are sent out. So it is a truer number than just coming up out of the sky, which is much better number also from the 7 million, I think, that was estimated last year before we even had any kind of numbers out there. That was the first original estimate that the DLGF came out with. But it is, and you can see in the past, we've kind of received a little bit more than, not a little bit, but sometimes a significant amount of money more than what the actual circuit breaker impacts were.
Right.
And it's usually July when we get our spring.
The spring settlement, but we don't know until we get that final fall settlement in December. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but spring settlement comes out in early June. If they're really good, it'll come out the very end of May, so.
Most of the differences were almost 400,000 above, except for 2014, which was only 61.
Boy, these circuit breakers are all over the place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can
Moving
really
target
see
all
the
the
trends
time.
like on the far right-hand side where you can
Mhm.
see how it increased by that $1 million. In 2018, it increased by 386,000, then it went down 836,000, and then it went, the year prior to that it was up. So it really is all over the place.
Right. So are we planning to just hold tight on this number? Are we going to absorb this out of the reserve
Well,
fund?
the last 12-line statement that I sent out to you all at the last meeting has these new numbers included.
Okay.
With these new numbers included, it brings the reserve levels for the general fund to 16.58%. For the Parks Department is 23.79. Sanitation is 73.24, and the Cume Capital Development is right at 15%. Well, no, excuse me, that just depends on if you do. Cume Capital Development is at quite a good substantial reserve. So,
But that last 12-line statement took all these numbers into account?
yes,
Cool.
yes.
But I met with Heather several times, and it makes her a little nervous to where, taking those numbers into account, where it sits our general fund. So we just have to be very mindful and watchful of that, because everything. So that's one of the reasons why we put the resolution in the packet for our meeting there, so we can hopefully ride this out, be very mindful and very watchful, because the last thing I want to do is do a budget reduction.
Right. I think that
So if we really
looking at this higher number, thinking that trending is normally not this high, but it's not going to be, that coverage is not going to be the total amount, obviously. It's not going to cover $800,000. But I think that it's going to have an impact to more than what we budgeted, but not as significant as the total. So
and
the larger amounts are included in the 12-line statement, and it's still above the 15% minimum requirements.
and
Right.
isn't it kind of accurate to say that nothing just kind of makes you a little nervous is that we're only in April?
It's such a questionable thing because you don't know the total impact
know.
until after December. That's the only thing, is that it could be quite substantial, but you're not going to know until people
Hold our
pay
breath and hope for the
their
best.
fall taxes. Yeah, you're not going to know until they pay that fall taxes.
Cool.
So this has a lot of information. It also has comparisons of our net AV, which is in the middle area. This is a pretty good document, I think. That net AV, how it increased by that $105 million from the year prior. And we're going in the right direction. You know, every year we're increasing in AV, and that's a good thing. Our tax rates for the city haven't increased in quite some time.
Actually
On
held
a
flat
whole.
since 2016 and decreased.
Mm-hmm.
If you look,
Yeah.
I didn't look back at the other, beyond that, but flat since 2015.
So that's why it's so significant when,
Since
you know-
Scotty Maples got elected, we haven't raised taxes.
right, yes, thank you, Scotty, yes. But we try so hard to keep,
That was
to
a
keep,
true statement.
That was a true statement.
Factual basis,
That
factual
was-
basis, that statement.
Don't you agree with me that since Scott Maples has been elected, taxes have not raised? Yes or no?
It's fact. It's
Yes.
fact.
Yes. Cross-examination.
You've also never
Actually, I
seen
can
me
say-
and Batman in the same place.
Then
at the same
also,
time.
That would be a
So,
factual basis also.
Also fact.
I could say a factual basis, they actually lowered.
So if I'm looking at this right,
uh-huh,
The rate.
2014, 27 million in assessed value, or no, excuse me. 2014, we saw an assessed value difference of negative
yes, it went
35
down,
million.
yes,
15 is 49 million.
it went increased, yes.
And then 31, 70, and then in 2018, 119, and in 2019, 105.
I
Right?
believe that that has to do with some property that might not have been picked up as part of inside the city, and so there were adjustments made.
Okay.
But in 2015 was the first time that we saw an increase in net assessed value since the housing crash in 2008.
Yep.
It took that long for
I remember that.
assessed value to come back up.
How much impact did the new assessments have on that? I think just about everyone in the city has probably got a newer assessment, and their taxes have increased.
Mine might increase by a significant amount.
And some of that might be how they assess things, because those do change.
Mhm.
I'm not real versed on the assessment side of things.
Can you go back at the very beginning when you started this, because when you explain it to me, I understand it, but my ability then to explain it to someone else is poor. So I would like to
Great.
get this another way.
Explain it to me and I'll say yes, I
About
know.
the school, about how we were short because basically school picked up. Explain to me how that hashes out.
Because the total tax rate, which is that over $3, there's 4 different ones. So you've got like $3.46 and $3.58. If you, the way that a particular home can be assessed is that your 1 acre and your homestead can only pay up to 1% of your property taxes. And then I believe anything above the 1 acre what's your 2%? You know much better than this.
2% is like a shed, a pool, concrete patio.
Detached
And your
garage.
3% is, well, the 3% is your detached garage.
Hmm.
If you have a pool and a patio on your property, then your 3% becomes your detached garage.
Okay.
So that's how that's figured in, 1, 2, and 3%.
And then where do apartments come into play? Are they
Apartments are 3%.
3? Okay, and commercials 3.
3%. And the thing about it is, you don't get a homestead on anything that's 3%. You only get it on the 1%.
Right.
2, 1, 3%.
Okay.
And you can also, if you're looking at the trends, you can see in 2018 how our major impacts were really on that 2%, and now it's shifted more to the 1%. So it's not, you can't call it it's just commercial, or it's just this, or it's just residential.
Okay, so now I got all that.
Mhm.
Tie that, what that got to do with school debt rate.
So your total tax rate can't be, so you take your assessed value for your home, you times it by your total tax rate, and they figure out what your liability is minus the credits that you can get. And then they figure it, if you had your taxes with you, I could much clearer explain this. There's a section in the middle there on the explanation sheet that you get that basically says, this is how much your circuit breaker maximum amount that you can be charged is this dollar amount. Because they've taken all your assessed values in the little buckets that your assessment is, and times it either by 1% or 2% or 3%, and they come up with this number. So then they figure out, well, are you paying, or is your liability more than that, or is your liability less than that? So if your liability is less than that, then you pay that amount. But if your liability is more than that, then you're only going to pay that maximum amount.
But because the,
Tax rate's more than $3.
because, and that's impacted because of the debt that the school has taken on.
Right.
Their renovations and the new school downtown? But
That's what I'm assuming.
The bonds,
Yeah.
bonds, okay.
whatever they bond.
So on our city tax rate, our general tax rate, our parks, our sanitation, our CD, on top of those things, those are just what come from the municipality.
Right.
On top of those things, you have the township library tax. You have the
County
certain-
taxes and,
You have the county taxes. In some places, you have a fire department tax. And then you have the school tax. And the school tax is broken down into several different parts, just like ours are.
Mhm.
And part of that is their debt service bonds. And that increase can affect everything else that
mhm.
you get taxed on, including, from municipals to townships to county.
A large tax rate sheet that's done every year, and
Right.
it breaks all that down by each unit and everything. And it's very telling to some, because if I got that and compared last year to this year, the majority of the school, not the school, but the library, the county, and all of their tax rates are lowering because we're getting a much better assessed valuation, and our assessments went up. But because of the schools increasing their debt rate because they had to, go into debt for, I'm assuming, for these new schools and things, then that's why their total tax rate increased by that 20 cents, 22 cents.
Doesn't TIF districts also hurt the schools? Because when you have a TIF district, isn't that money that stays within that district that the schools don't get?
Not necessarily. We have a few TIF districts that are going to expire in the next few years. When that expiration happens, that assessed valuation that was being captured for the increment, because it was capped at the base, and then anything that was growth is the increment, and that's what the TIF is collecting. So the base never changed for what they were originally collecting in the first place. But when the TIF expires or sunsets, then that assessment will go back into the big pot, and you can see how that net AV right now is that the current one? Yeah, at 1 million or 1,700 million. That'll increase there, which then in turn could potentially lower the circuit breaker impact. But because levies are capped, you're only allowed to have a certain percentage increase in levy. I believe last year was like 3% or something. It was, I do know this number. 3.4% is all the increased revenue that you're allowed to have for your certified levy,
Regardless of
regardless of your
district
assessed
or
valuation.
anything else.
So the only thing that those tips falling off would help benefit would be potentially a lower of circuit breaker impact. They wouldn't do anything to their revenue side of their levy.
But also the TIF can be expanded, which will cause it to not sunset.
But as far as seeing more revenue because of the expiration of a TIF, that's not really what that's not really what we could expect. We expect rates to go down or rates to change, but as far as income collected, tax income collected, it's not going to have much of an impact, if any.
And with it,
Though that's not what everybody would have you believe, TIFs are terrible things that,
and that assessed value goes back into the whole pot. So it gets spread out between everyone. Right now, that TIF increment is just funneled to the city. Funneled
So
might not be a right word, but
So the 1.7 billion in AV that's listed here, net AV, is everything that's outside of a TIF district that's not
Yes,
collected in a TIF district.
yes,
It includes all of the base level
Yes.
evaluation for those districts.
yes.
I thought the AD had all of it in the tip neutralization. But I thought the 1.7, 1,701,000, I know when I was assessor, that's what we went on the net AD.
That,
And then they.
you would know better than I would, so I would assume,
Okay.
I assume that
So
it did
then
not.
that's before the TIF neutralization?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, your net AD, yeah.
okay.
Because, each year I said it's going to go up, well, that's because of the building shop.
Right.
Callie, do you want me to explain this a little, or?
I think next year, I saw something placed on fiscal notes under the state legislature's website, fiscal notes for a tax study. I think next year it's projected in Clark County that the circuit breaker might be going down. I was looking at that the other day.
That would be great.
If I can find that, I'll send it to you all.
I did not get a chance to talk to anyone from the school district, and it might be interesting to know what their debt schedule looks like for the next few years.
Well, because
And
that's-
if it's potentially, if you get a bond, they're normally 20, 30-year kind of bonds. Is this the new normal for the next 20, 30 years? Or are we going to have some debt fall off? Is it kind of a wrap debt that they have? I
Yeah,
don't
that was
know
gonna be
what
my-
their debt is.
Kind of where I was going with that, because I know there was a discussion when the school district was pitching their $100 million plus bond, that they were intended on doing wraparound increment financing, and so they were pitching it as things aren't really going to change, because as debt gets added, debt is dropping off, and we're going to keep this. Because when I see what the increase is, I mean, obviously, yeah, they floated bonds for schools. I assume they've already gotten the bond for the downtown school, for example. I mean, that shouldn't have appeared yet. Like, that's why I'm trying to match the dates with the numbers, and I don't know how they did it, but I mean, I don't think that should even be in consideration yet. But I have no idea. I mean, I haven't talked to anybody from school, so I don't know.
Well, and one thing, Scott, it is on, I can try looking that up for you tomorrow on the DLGF on the gateway, because they have to post everything on the gateway just like we do.
Okay.
That would definitely be a great conversation to have with them.
Well, I appreciate this information, because I got an earful yesterday about assessments and taxes, and yesterday in church.
Because the
Wow.
tax bills went out, didn't they? Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And then, his bill went up, tax bill went up 21%, and, he didn't understand.
I really like that they have that supplemental page that goes with your tax bill, and I think that they've tried to explain it. If you, it's hard to look at the paper and try and figure it out, but if somebody can explain it to you the first time, it just
While
clicks
you're
after
looking
that,
at it.
yeah.
Right.
And I'm glad that that's there.
There's also a pie chart, I'll try to find for you too.
I'm sorry.
There's also a pie chart, I'll try to
Oh.
find for you too, which
Oh,
even
okay.
explains it. In layman's term, it's
Right.
much easier to look at because they can see how the pie is.
Well, then that'll be good to
Yeah.
explain to constituents that
That's
So
what
that
I'm
it's-
saying, yeah.
they'll be able to
Is that,
understand that then.
Is that something that you can have for each year going back a number
I
of years?
think so, I'll have to look.
That
At
would
one time
be-
I could
That would
get
be
it.
very helpful.
But the one thing is 2018 was a reassessment year.
Yeah,
So, I mean, no matter what,
everything's going up.
everything's going to go up. And also they got to remember that the sale of houses. So
Oh, yeah.
the house market has really escalated in
Yeah.
17 and 18. So that's also going to,
People like you.
that's going to cause it too.
Right.
It's all your fault, Scott.
I'll see what information I can pull down for you all. The only reason I say that, man, is I just got disappointed.
Oh, I'm sure you did.
Yeah, I can explain the calculations, but the assessment part, I'm not real good at.
So I think I'm pretty up to speed on exactly what the situation is, I guess, and if you've already discussed this, my apologies, but my main question is just what would you recommend? What are some of the what's the next step for us in kind of taking this information? How do we move forward now? that we've
I
got
think
these
some of the
numbers?
takeaways are that it's really hard to nail that number down.
Yeah, and we don't get the exact number until,
December,
okay, I was thinking October, December, okay.
Yeah.
So,
and then after that, it's already done, you
Yeah.
know, and
Yeah.
so it is a very difficult number to nail down. At least we have a high number right now. We can always work off the high number, and then
yeah,
we're hopeful to get additional funds.
okay.
But looking at the last meeting, I gave you all the new 12-line statement that had these new numbers included in there, and our reserves are still above the 15%, which is the minimum. So it is potentially something that could
Just
be
roll
absorbed
in and
into
it's-
the
okay.
operating or surplus monies, and the budget is currently spending more than the current year revenues, so it is dipping into the reserve sum, but not as significant as the 800,000.
Okay.
So
What is the dip now? Do you know about what that?
223,000
Year to date or projected?
projected. So that's if we receive the revenues that are very conservative, and if we spend every dollar in every budget.
Okay.
Since
So then, sorry.
Go ahead.
So then, what I'm hearing is we just kind of, worst case scenario is we absorb it, we kind of watch it, we see how this might fluctuate. We might be able to get some additional revenues from other places to offset some of it, but we're just kind of like, okay, let's just monitor it every so often and see what it's doing.
And you can. I also
Sure.
give you the fat packet of papers that show your account balances, and on the very front page is the revenues for the general fund.
Right.
So you can kind of track to see what's forecasted, and
Something is higher than what,
Mhm.
which we have had in the past.
the
in
building
several of those.
permits, I think, were increased. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So a number of additional appropriations could negatively impact this then.
To the general fund or any of the property tax funds.
But by absorbing this, like in this 12-line statement, then we need to send that message some way, somehow, that the department heads have to live within their budget.
I'm just the facts fan.
But you and I have had several meetings on this, and I took all my concerns to you, so.
since we have this broke down in front of us, and we got a little time, I think, we're going to be talking a little bit about pulling some money from some funds later for something different. But when we talk about, when we see this abstract section 5 for 2019, we've got Jeff City OFW and Jeff City IFW. That stands for inside the flood wall and outside the flood wall. So everything that's inside the flood wall on that second line, you notice that that has a higher tax rate. And the reason for that is because they pay taxes to the flood control district. Am I right?
Yes.
So when we talk about what flood control is going to pay for later, remember that it's folks that live in the city of Jeffersonville inside that flood wall that are paying for those things, you know, through that flood control district. Then when we pay for those things with other tax dollars, we're tapping them twice, you know, because they're paying into these income taxes, they're paying into, you know, our general fund taxes. It's just having that broke down is a good illustration of you know, where we're pulling money from and how that affects certain people different than it does, you know, the rest of the city. And they don't see that necessarily, but it's there. I also noticed that even though we can say that tax rates for the city of Jeff have gone down or held constant since Maples got elected, the total tax rate has not shared that, you know, same trend. You know, the total tax rate is going up. You know, so even though
It's a hard conversation to have when you're
Yeah.
out on the streets and talking to people, is
That's on Scott. Well, you can notice that it goes up particularly more in the 6th district where the Charlestown Township hits the city of Jeffersonville. I'm just spewing out facts. I don't know.
That's exactly true.
It's all those signs going out is what it is. You know.
Once again, Batman and I have never been seen together.
Yeah, well,
That is a very good point, because it is difficult to have those conversations with people that say, you know, we're trying to be, you know, good stewards of your
Of
tax
tax
dollars, and, well, then why you keep increasing my
but
tax
why
rate?
does the tax rate keep going up?
Yeah.
Well, the tax rate is going up. I agree with you, but when you talk about the city of Jeffersonville, the tax rate has gone down since 2014. It's not increased since 2014 in any form. But tax rates.
Are you dying?
Sorry, yeah.
No, I mean,
Oh, my gosh.
Lisa's dying.
You gonna make it?
I hope so, because we got a lot on the agenda, but if this heat keeps,
I'll turn it down a second.
You got some steroids?
So I think all that's a lot of good conversations, and I think this is a lot of information. And this is what I like to do, is look at the trends and try and get as much information on one sheet of paper.
but I love as long as we're mindful and we watch, and hopefully department heads will come along with us. I already talked to the mayor about all that, but absorb it, because I do not want to have to go into, remember that first year? And
Yes, if you look
and
at
I can remember that.
2013, I think it
Remember that first time we
is.
dealt, we had to go do a budget reduction, and it was
2013,
horrible.
you had a $3 million impact and did not account for it in any budget.
Yeah.
I
Talk about a
did-
bad day.
Yeah, and I did
That was
talk,
the first year that I started working here.
Yeah.
and I did talk with several of the department heads to, about mindful and all, and they get it, they're like, but we'll get to keep our budget, we won't do a budget reduction. I said, as long as you stay within your budget.
Mhm.
They're like, okay. So fingers
Well, I
crossed.
think the first year y'all were shopping was in 2012.
Yeah.
Exactly, that was
2012
our
was
first
worse.
year on the council,
Yeah.
and we're like, we
I
had
don't
to go
have
through
data for
line by
that,
line
yeah.
the budget, and we had to do the cuts.
It was $1 million.
2012 was worse.
It was horrible.
But since
Horrible.
Scotty Maples got elected
Scotty
with
Maples.
Callie on.
I was gonna say,
With
I
her-
feel like I mean, we were at the same time, but I know it was Scotty mostly, but. Heather, I just want to thank you for making these difficult decisions so much easier, and really
Did,
helping
yeah.
people like me who are visual, making
Did.
it easier for me to understand. I really appreciate that.
I like how the
plan.
colors flow.
Me too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Good
this,
scheme,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
it's like, yeah,
when she showed me this chart, I was like,
yeah.
and then
So
went
It doesn't
back.
quite go in
and
order,
we see the
but-
trends, and we see how it went, was very educational.
It
You get her
doesn't go
talking
unnoticed,
about
I appreciate
taxes and all that stuff, she'll go on for days. She
I
gets
know,
excited.
I'll stick with this, it's not that,
Yeah, it's not in a quite flowy order as much as I'd like, but this is how my brain thought of it at the time I was setting it up.
All right, does anybody have anything else for Heather? If not, we can adjourn.
I'll just say one quick thing.
Okay.
Since you know me and I'm out. I know when you all did your budget for 2018 and 2019, AVs were late getting done by the county.
Yep.
So you all actually did your budget on what your last year AVs were. So, you know.
Well, and I
And
remember,
this year they should have it, there's some new sets and guidelines that they need to have it in by,
I do know the
Yeah.
DLGF commissioner has
yeah.
really been on phone calls talking to
Yeah.
people,
Was that-
unlike any other commissioner's ever been.
because I brought that up during budget time, that we didn't have those.
Well, he
And
was
basically,
part of the treasurer, so he
I
knows
know.
how things are done.
Yeah.
Good, I'm glad that
But,
that'll be.
yeah, that was one of the things, so you all, Heather didn't know, and you all didn't know. So
Yeah.
you used last year's numbers.
That, and I know he actually calls units when they have additional appropriations, like ridiculous additional appropriations. And
Yeah.
like, it's January, why are you doing additional appropriation when, yeah, he's like you all trying to figure out ways to
Very-
get around things that you shouldn't need to be doing that. I mean,
What's his name? Wes Bennett?
Mhm. He was
clerk treasurer of the city.
Plainville,
He
is
was
it?
clerk treasurer of Plainfield, but he was
Plainfield.
vice president of a bank, which is clerk treasurer.
Yeah, he even, those emails you sent out, we could sit down and talk to him about additional appropriations and
Ron's ears are perking up over there.
You know,
he's like, I'm right, I don't care, Scott, maybe he's got elected, I'm right.
What is the theme? Is that a
well,
theme?
and that's one of the things that,
It's a good
you
theme,
know,
I like
he
it.
brought up in one of our clerk's
The holidays
meetings
national
Yes, he
appreciate
did.
Scotty Maple
was
City Elected
that,
Day.
you know, most,
He has a tough job, you know, so we gotta show him some love.
I'm listening, I agree.
one of the things that he mentioned is, in one of our clerk's trainings, when he was the vice president of our group, and he also speaks in our meeting, was that his Plainfield only did 3 or 4 additional appropriations the whole year.
Wow.
And he's very in tune to,
Mhm.
yeah, like she said, but he'll call you.
He says, why are you doing additional appropriation for $1? Because there are people who do additional appropriations for $1, which is just a waste of money to advertise it and
Cost
waste
you
all
more
of your
to-
time and
yeah,
waste
cost
my
you
time.
Well, my thought is that, why do we go through the budget process and spend all the time going through the budget process and then immediately blow the budget with additional appropriations? I think that we
Most
need-
of the ones that were done this year were kind of appropriating cash that was already in there that wasn't known until the end of the year. So that's part of that too, and found revenues, I guess.
I agree, but there are also some that see an opportunity because there's a surplus, let's go grab this surplus and spend all we can while we can, and then at the end of the year, if we got anything left, we'll turn that back in. I think it ought to go the other way around.
Well, we'll just have to keep an eye and make that decision, because you remember, usually when we thought that, remember we put that resolution out, I don't know if it was resolution or ordinance, no capital purchase over 5,000 and all that, which we haven't had to do that the last several years.
There's not
So-
much capital budget in the general fund or in property tax funds. Honestly, it's all been shifted to other funds. So it would not, I mean, you can do that, but it wouldn't mean anything to a lot of to most departments. I don't think there's much in it at all.
All right, anything else? A motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you all for